Hello, my name is 환산스님 and this is Sun Meditation in English. Having now assumed correct meditation posture, let's enter into preparation breathing. So all together, breathe in through the nose and completely fill your lung. Hold, and then exhale through the mouth. When we exhale on the out-breath, imagine and feel that you're blowing out all the accumulated tension and stress and worry and useless or obsessive thinking that have been filling our minds and bodies throughout the day. One more time, inhale. Hold. And then exhale. And why don't we enter immediately and seamlessly into our abdominal breathing? So once more, inhale and push out your lower belly. Hold. And then exhale through your nose and draw in your lower belly. Once more, inhale. Hold. Then exhale. One more time, inhale. Hold. Then exhale. And as we continue our abdominal breathing, let's now engage our hwadu, the question that is the focus of our meditation practice. 이모고. So inhale. Hold. And then out loud. 이모고. Once more, inhale. Hold. Then exhale. 이모고. 이모고. What is this? What is this that directs my body? What is this that's listening to the words of this program and watching the image on the screen? What is this that feels the emotions rising up in my heart? When I see an image in my mind, when I imagine the face of a loved one, or the room that I live in, or the place that I work in, what is it within me that sees that image in my mind like a movie image projected on a screen? This is the question we ask ourselves. And in asking ourselves this question, we generate within our minds and bodies the state of unknowable doubt, the state of being blocked, the state of urgently needing to know the unknowable, to perceive the unperceivable. And when we feel the presence of this doubt, creating this doubt, maintaining this doubt is the goal of sun meditation. And when we feel this state of doubt, we keep paying attention to it. And as we've noted on this program before, when we pay attention to something, we send energy to it. We increase its intensity, we make it last longer. So by observing the doubt, that's what this form of meditation is formally called. We observe the state of doubt within our minds and bodies, and by observing, by paying attention to it, we maintain it, we intensify it, we make it grow bigger and bigger. And that is the heart of this form of meditation. We don't need to get hung up on those words, imoko, or what is this? They are merely a trigger, a way of creating the state of doubt. The state of doubt is the heart of meditation. So I would like to ask all of our viewers and our studio audience members to maintain this posture as we always do, to maintain this breathing as we always do, and throughout the course of this program, try to maintain the state of doubt while observing it. And when you feel that doubt fade away or be covered up or obscured by stray thoughts or stray imagery or emotions, then breathe in, hold, and on the out-breath, once again ask, 이모고. My teacher's teacher, Sun Master Jeongang, compared holding the hwadu to hitting a giant temple bell. Once we get used to meditating a little bit, when we ask ourselves, 이모고 just once, it's like hitting a giant bell. the sound resonates and resounds and fills the space around us, fills the space within us. And just like a bell, that sound perseveres through time for a while, and then when it fades and finally fades and there's quiet again, then again we breathe in, hold, and we breathe out, and we ask Imoko, and it's like hitting the bell again. And what we want to do is maintain that resonance of the bell uninterrupted by continually renewing it with each Imoko. So why don't we try that in the course of this program as we now address the topic for today's program. So the topic for today's contemplation and meditation is the nature and role of friendship in modern society. Both my Korean and international friends, especially the young ones, have been telling me that they're having difficulty with their friendships. Having left school and entered the job market, they find that it's more difficult to give time and attention and make plans with friends. They feel like they're growing distant from friends. And as they enter the competitive job market, as they enter the complications of modern societal life, they tell me that, that our hearts seem to close up, that it's harder to open up and be so open and trusting with our friends as we used to be. And then there's conflicting priorities. So as time passes on, especially as we concentrate on our careers and all the things we need to do to get ahead and to set up our foundation for living in society and for maintaining it, we find ourselves strangely growing more and more distant from our friends, and we feel, well, am I doing something wrong? Or is my personality developing in a negative direction or in a dysfunctional direction? So today's question is, does traditional Sun Buddhist teachings and practices, do they offer something to help us in dealing with these problems in modern friendship? Now, the thing that we need to understand in the context of this program is that friendship is an enormously broad topic. People live very different lives, and they're in very different circumstances. But more than that, as our older viewers will know, the nature and role of friendship changes as we age. For most of us, we form our first really close friendships in school, at some time in school. And these friendships can be very romantic and very intense. We feel they're like a kind of new family, a family that we've chosen, that our hearts have chosen, that it's not just family that we were born with. And so there's a very romantic feeling of it's us against the world. It's us together, moving out into the world. And we make promises to each other in our youth that we'll be friends forever. We will always be there for each other. But as the years pass, we find that other commitments and priorities begin to conflict or compete for our attention and our energy and our time. Probably the first of these is the formation of romantic relationship. Often for many of us that begins in school. And for the first time, we have to choose between the people that are close to us, between our romantic partners and our friends. And so this is the first sort of sign of oncoming adulthood. And then for those of us who are achievement-oriented, we begin to have to prioritize our time because we need to study and to build our resumes and so forth for our future life in advanced education and then later in society. So already this is the precursor of conflict between career and relationships. So even by the time many of us have graduated high school, we're already trying to juggle a number of commitments. And but even so, throughout our school years, we are able to proceed with our friends as if we are sharing our lives with them. We're somehow together on the path of life because we're thrown together into a common environment and a common educational system. Once we leave that education, for many of us, life becomes much more tense. And we're not bound together in a common environment. We're scattered across our jobs and the places that we live. And in modern life, often we move to different cities or completely different locations, so we're physically distant from one another. But more so than that, as we enter into our professional careers, whether we like it or not, often we tend to become very, very self-centered because we need to build our careers and we feel that our welfare is at stake. So there's a great deal of anxiety and worry that goes into it that makes our emotions become constricted so that even when we do meet people, we're very preoccupied with the thoughts and emotions that are going on in our heads. And we find that even though we may be physically present with our friends, we're not as emotionally available. And although once when we were in school, we were able to say to each other, I will always be there, you will always be there for me, now we become hesitant about making such pacts of friendship. Now we wonder whether we can give that kind of commitment to another person, and we also wonder whether it's okay to ask them for it. We become hesitant to reach out to others, just as we become hesitant to give of our time and our energy and our attention. And this seems to progress even further once we get married. And it's taken for granted in most cultures that once you get married, that your spouse, your partner, has a privileged relationship with you, that your deepest thoughts and feelings are to be shared with him or her. And there is an innate agreement that what you talk about, what you concern yourselves with is private and not to be shared with the outer world. So once we get married or our friends get married, we feel one step removed, even though we may still be very close friends. And this progress seems to go on and on. After children, many of us find that we're almost completely preoccupied now by our livelihood and by raising our families. And we find that somewhere along the line, in our friendships, we went from sharing our lives, sharing our thoughts and feelings, to just talking about them with each other, just reporting them to each other. And we may begin to feel, as we become increasingly committed to our families and our livelihood, and as we find that we're not seeing our friends as often as we used to, not sharing with our friends as often as we used to, we may begin to ask ourselves, well, is it impossible to share our lives with anyone but legally or blood-related family? Now, recently, in recent years, there's been this new phenomenon of forming friendship through technological social media, so-called networking. And this is truly, I believe, an amazing development. For the first time, we are able to become friends with people that we may never meet, because we can exchange with these distant friends anything that can be digitized. We can talk to each other and see each other's faces through services like Skype, where you can see basically a video phone call where you can see each other's image as well as hear each other's voices. You can send each other images and sounds and text, and there's all different ways to communicate. And this affords new kinds of friendship, historically new kinds of friendship. And in certain ways, we can talk with such friends in ways that we cannot talk with those around us, with those who are physically close to us. Because just as we are often able to tell a stranger or a therapist things that we cannot tell our closest friends or family members, precisely because they're one step removed from our lives, in that same way, we are able to share in different ways with friends that we meet through networking or social media. So I don't want to underestimate the power of this new kind of relationship. And I think that it bears comparison. This is not the first time that this type of friendship has been made available to the general population. I think the very first time that this kind of friendship occurred in history occurred actually several hundred, if not 1,000 years ago, when the postal system was first created. When human beings in communities developed enough social organization that they could transport messages on paper to each other in a reliable and predictable way, and thus we could become friends with people very distant from us, so-called pen pals. And there's a whole tradition, both in the East and the West, that romanticizes this friendship of being able to share our heart secrets in our writing with distant friends. Even romances have been conducted in this way. In traditional East Asian culture, there's an entire tradition of writing calligraphy, poems, in beautiful ink brushwork, so that you're not only receiving text, you see the movement of their hand, you see their artistic temperament and their personality reflected in their artwork. And it's as if you've received a piece of them. Now, this sort of letter writing and exchange of paper and pen and ink has been supplanted now by these social media. And there's pros and cons to that, but nonetheless, this is sort of a development, an advancement of this older model of being able to be friends over distance. So this is an amazing and wonderful thing, and I think it's something that we need to explore, and we will explore in the coming years. But nonetheless, I think that there's a general consensus that although we can share friendships through social media, through networking, and we can do certain kinds of relating that are not available in traditional forms of relationship, nonetheless, I do not think these sorts of relationships can actually replace the physical presence of family and friends. That there are certain things that we simply need the person to be present for in order to have the kind of exchange that we desire and that energizes both participants in a relationship. And then, of course, there are those of us who have not followed the traditional, college and then get a job and then get married and then have kids path. That's considered the mainstream path in most societies. But there are so many of us who do not follow that path. There are many of us who have become divorced or who never married. There are many of us who are estranged from their legal or biological families, or who simply never knew their families, or who have extraordinary life circumstances so that they have no significant human relationships. For people like these, for people like us, the need for friendship is urgent and compelling. So whether you're sort of on the beaten track of society's expectations or not, I think most of us, if not all of us, come to a time when we want to take off our social mask and be seen for who we are. We want to meet with someone, and in front of that person, we don't want to be their colleague or coworker. We don't want to be someone's son or daughter. We don't want to be someone's husband or wife. We don't want to be someone's brother or sister or someone's mother or father. We want to be seen for our personalities, for the thoughts and feelings that we hold in our hearts. In a word, we miss being with a friend again. And at that time, we may pull out our cell phone and we may go into our list of contacts. And you'll see most of us will have a very large number of contacts, phone numbers that we can call. And we may look through all of that contact information that we've taken down over time. And strangely, in the most disheartening way, we may find that of all those contacts, we have no one to call a friend. So why don't we take a break here? And then when we get back, we'll see what Sun Buddhist teachings and practices have to offer for remedying those kinds of situations. So the question once again is, what do traditional Sun Buddhist teachings and practices have to offer to help us in forming and maintaining our friendships in modern society? Now, many of us may actually be surprised to hear that the historical Buddha himself very greatly emphasized the importance and value of friendship, especially for his monks. There's an image, especially within Korean Buddhism, that monastics cut themselves away from society, seclude themselves in the mountains, and shun all human contact. But the truth is, the Buddha actually taught quite the opposite. The following story that I'll share, actually I have shared on this program before, but the story goes that the Buddha's personal attendant, a monk named Ananda, who was biologically the Buddha's younger cousin, and who after becoming a monk, worked as the Buddha's personal attendant for many years, and after the Buddha passed away, played a pivotal role in recording all of the Dharma speeches that the Buddha had delivered over his long career. This Ananda was deeply moved by the friendships that he had formed with his fellow monks and co-practitioners. And moved in that way, he approached the Buddha. And he said to the Buddha that these friendships, he said, these friendships are half of the holy life, Lord. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie. The Buddha looked at him very quietly, and then he replied, "Don't say that, Ananda. Don't say that. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. When a monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades, he can be expected to develop and pursue the path to enlightenment." So in this way, the Buddha greatly emphasized the role of friendship, and friendship was considered a foundation, one of the foundations for a monk's religious progress. It was considered a necessary ingredient for the welfare and well-being of monks, and it was even considered an indicator, a predictor that the monk will eventually reach enlightenment. This idea of the importance of friendship was developed into the concept of what is called in Sanskrit, Kalyana Mitrata, which means good friendship. And a person who is engaged in that kind of friendship is called a Kalyana Mitra, which means a good friend. Now, this concept was formed in terms of the monastic system that the Buddha invented for his disciples. And within that system, it was taught that there are basically three kinds of good friend or Kalyana Mitra. The first kind of good friend is one's religious teacher, one's spiritual guide and master. And so in that context, our greatest friend, our best friend is the Buddha and the enlightened sages who carried on the Buddhist tradition. The second type of friend is a co-practitioner, someone that we practice with. And then finally, the third kind of friend for monks are lay supporters who are steadfast in their support of the monastic community and in their own individual practice. So in this way, friendship was expected to be conducted and engaged in with those whom we admire. Now, the Buddha did not leave out lay people, normal people like you and me, in his teachings on friendship. In a different discourse, he recommends for lay people, for those of us who continue to live in society and try to conduct our spiritual practice in society, he said, for us, he said, "And what is meant by admirable friendship? There is the case where a lay person, in whatever town or village he may dwell, spends time with householders or householders' sons, young or old, who are advanced in virtue. He talks with them, engages them in discussions. He emulates consummate conviction in those who are consummate in conviction, consummate virtue in those who are consummate in virtue, consummate generosity in those who are consummate in generosity, and consummate discernment in those who are consummate in discernment." This is called admirable friendship. So the Buddha very strongly advised us to create and maintain friendships with those we feel have admirable qualities. This was his teaching on friendship. Now, how can we apply that in the busy lives that we lead now? The first thing that I would like to touch on is to discuss, first of all, the value of meditation for those of us who want to create, maintain, and develop our friendships. Now, one of the great benefits of meditation is that it makes us calm. It makes us understanding. It helps us to regulate our thoughts and emotions and become more autonomous and more independent. This means that when we engage people, we're not bringing so much emotional neediness and social anxiety into the picture. This makes us more approachable. And as we become calm and quiet, as we learn how to direct our attention in a quiet but powerful way to the object or target of our choice, we begin on an intuitive level to be able to exhibit greater and deeper understanding of those we meet. We see more in them, we feel more in them, we sense more in them. And people sense that we are responding this way. They feel accepted. They feel that it's okay to be themselves in front of us. This makes us more appealing. And as we advance in our meditative practice and our minds become very calm and very clear, perhaps like a very still lake without any ripples or waves in it, perhaps like the surface of a mirror that has no dust, that is completely well polished. If our minds can be like that, we find that we can reflect another human being in our own hearts. We can hold them there. And that other person senses that they are reflected in our hearts and minds as they are. They feel that as understanding and openness and acceptance. These are things that we all commonly seek out in our human relationships. And if people begin to see that in us, they'll want to come to us. We can, in this way, meditation can make us more appealing, more attractive to others, even though we may not always feel that we have those qualities. This is something that we as practitioners can try. Just see how the meditation affects our personalities, see how it affects the way we interact with people. So in this way, meditation can give us a leg up in creating intimate bonds of friendship with other people. Now, another Sun Buddhist teaching that I would like to share with all of you is actually the concept in Korean Buddhism called Doban. Now, Doban, D-O-B-A-N, as in nurse, means literally companion on the path, friend on a shared spiritual path. And in the strict Korean Buddhist context, it literally means someone that you're practicing meditation or undertaking spiritual practice with. But the concept is understood to be very broad in its scope. Anyone can be our Doban. Theoretically speaking, anyone we meet is potentially our Doban, our friend on a shared spiritual path to enlightenment. Someone that we can help to enlightenment, someone who can help us to enlightenment. Not only any other human being, any other living being can be our Doban. Not only any other living being, any physical thing, any object, any thought even, feeling in our own mind can be a Doban. The entire world can be a Doban. The place that we're at can be a Doban. Every single moment of our lives can be a Doban, a companion on the path to enlightenment, someone or something that inspires me to enlightenment. Now, this may sound highly theoretical and idealistic and maybe even romantic and poetic, but I think that this idea, this very sweeping, expansive idea of the Doban is rooted in the practicalities of actual, concrete meditative practice. And I would like to break that down for all of us here. When we say that anyone or anything can be our Doban, what we're really saying is that in any given moment, when we are meeting a circumstance, another living being, or some material object, we have a choice in front of us. There's a fork in the road in front of us. We can use that meeting as the occasion to fall deeper into the habitual flow of thoughts and emotions and imagery that's always happening in our heads. And when we do that, that meeting is detrimental. It draws us deeper and deeper into the darkness of our unconscious processes. It draws us deeper and deeper away from the living moment, the moment that our life is actually happening. In that occasion, the Buddhist masters tell us, even if you're with someone whom you love dearly, who loves you dearly, they have been an occasion, they have been a cause for you straying away from the path of enlightenment, and therefore they are not a good friend in that moment. You have not allowed them, we have not allowed them to be a good friend, a Kalyana Mitra. On the other hand, for those of us who are trained in meditation, we can take even a very painful or very negative encounter and use that as occasion for meditative practice, use that as a challenge, as an opportunity to deepen and strengthen our practice. We can literally, in that moment, when we feel some kind of intellectual or cognitive or emotional or physiological response to some meeting, we can take that as the occasion to go to our posture, our breathing, and hold imoko in our minds. And when we do that, we have made them a good friend. We have made them the occasion for our advancement on the path to enlightenment. When we understand the concept of Doban in these clear, concrete terms, then we will know that the question of friendship is always within our hands. The way we react internally determines whether that person or that thing or that whatever will be a friend to our lives or not. and whether I will be a friend to that thing or not. So in this way, the concept of Toban is not just some high-blown, sort of fanciful ideal that we aspire to. It's an actual procedure and strategy for going through life and for dealing with all of the many meetings and encounters that we will inevitably come across in the course of living. So this is a very important concept within Korean Buddhism and within Sun Buddhism as a whole, this idea of Toban, that anything and anyone can be a friend on my path to enlightenment. This makes the question of friendship an issue of voluntary action, rather than sort of taking a passive posture and waiting for someone to appear or for something to appear in our lives, because waiting can be very painful and very dreary. So this concept of Toban can be helpful to us in that practical way. And when we do that, when we begin to exercise our meditation in the daily encounters of our lives, we begin to develop greater and greater and greater skill in regulating and managing our thoughts and emotions. And what that means, socially speaking, is that we don't need so much the understanding and acknowledgement of other people. We can understand and acknowledge ourselves. We don't need our relationships to tell us who we are, which is so often the case, especially among young people, that it is through our relationships, through the way people react to us, that we discover who we are in front of the world. But if we learn this powerful method of internal perception and observation that meditation offers, we are no longer demanding and asking that of those around us. And when that happens, when we become when our own issues and our own questions about ourselves no longer dominate our attention, that frees us to give more of our attention to those around us. We are more available to the world. And what happens is that there's a subtle shift in our posture toward the world. We are no longer asking for tobans. We are no longer asking for good friends. We are seeking to become a good friend to others, to become an inspiration for the enlightenment, or at least the growth and development of others. And in that way, we become a Kalyana Mitrata to others. In that way, even though we may not be passing on any information or knowledge, even though we may not be explicitly teaching anyone, we become a spiritual guide to others simply because we know how to give attention. And that is what most people want from relationships. And when we do this, we find that people will seek us out. People will come to us because we can be generous with our attention, because we've taken the focus of our attention away from our own obsessive thoughts and emotions. And this brings us into the path of the ideal of Mahayana Buddhism, which is the path of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is a spiritual being, a living being, who makes his or her goal not only personal enlightenment, but the enlightenment of all living beings, all so-called sentient beings. Within the terms of the Bodhisattva ideal, I practice meditation not for my own enlightenment, but so that I try to become enlightenment so that I can lead others to enlightenment. To put this in a metaphorical way, I learn how to swim, not only to save myself from drowning, but so that I can go out, swim back into the ocean, and save all the other people who are drowning, teach them how to swim too, and so that we can fill the world with enlightened people. This means that for the Bodhisattva that their total and complete attention is devoted away from themselves to the world, the infinite world of living beings around us. Now, many of us, when we encounter this teaching of the Bodhisattva path, we can feel slightly intimidated. How can I possibly address the needs, the pain, the suffering of so many people? There are, by current estimates, 7 billion people in the world. How can any one person address all that? How can any one nation address all of that? And what we need to understand, and what we will understand in the course of meditation, is that when you meditate, you begin to realize when you give all of your attention away, when you begin to live for others, you're not sacrificing anything. You're not losing personal happiness. You're not giving up the fulfillment of your personal desires. Actually, you gain much more. you gain the friendship of the entire world. You gain the companionship of the entire world. You gain the camaraderie of the entire world. This is a very famous concept in Korean Buddhism. It is through non-possession, non-clinging, that we come into possession of everything there is. And this is when it's spoken like this, it sounds like a concept, but it is actually a way of living life and in a way of experiencing life that can only be afforded to us through the practice of meditation. So in this way, through the course of spiritual practice, through meditation, and through progress through the various levels of meditation, we can answer the question of how to get good friends and how to become a good friend to the world. Now, this will probably sound very, very theoretical to most of our viewers or our studio audience members who are encountering this teaching for the first time. So on a very practical level, on a very simple level for beginning meditators like ourselves, when we ask ourselves the question, how shall I create or maintain or find the right kind of friendship, I would like to offer the very simple suggestion that we may find it very helpful to join a spiritual community. And if we can't find the right community for ourselves, we may try to make the effort, and we can even use the social media that I mentioned earlier. We may try to find like-minded individuals and create our own community. Now, the most important thing here is that when we try to take on an endeavor like that, we must be willing to give the necessary time commitment, energy commitment, and attention commitment. There's no way around it. We have to pencil it into our calendar. And we have to make room for it. And it's not just about making time and showing up at the right place at the right time. We have to bring our attention to it. It's no good to arrive exhausted or with a million different things on our mind. No one wants to be a friend with someone like that. So we have to go into it very, very wholeheartedly. So this is a bit of practical advice that I would like to share, in addition to the teachings that I've already tried to introduce. In conclusion, I'd like to return to the Buddha's original concept of the good friend, and I would really like to address our younger viewers who are still really struggling with the issues of friendship. This is a teaching that I personally wish I had been introduced to when I was young, when I was in high school or in college, because so often when we're young, we choose our friendships, we choose our romances based on what we are drawn to, what we are emotionally drawn to, what we envy, what we desire. And these may not be admirable qualities. These may not be trustworthy qualities. And it's common for the young to be drawn to those who are very outwardly attractive or who are very charming or who seem very accomplished or who have something that seems outstanding, and we want to be associated with them. But from the Buddhist perspective, this is not a good basis for friendship. The Buddha's advice is to find people in whom we see something admirable. Now, that's a tall order, but nonetheless, I think if the Buddha bothered to teach it, he must have meant it, and we could make the effort. Maybe we won't find that many of them, but nonetheless, to find someone in whom we see something admirable, and more than that, for that person to become someone admirable, at least in our character and in our conscience. Because you have to, both sides have to have similar qualities for an admirable friendship, using the Buddha's words, to occur. Now, for many of us, we may not feel very admirable. We may be at a time in our lives when we feel dejected or depressed. So for those of us who feel alone and estranged, and maybe even depressed or underconfident, I would like to share the words of that great enlightened sage and former heavyweight boxing champion, the great Muhammad Ali, who once said, "Inside the ring or outside the ring, ain't nothing wrong with going down. It's staying down that's wrong." I think that's a wonderful teaching. It's okay to get down from time to time, but we shouldn't let ourselves stay there. In the terms of my teacher, Sun Master Songdam, the worst thing we can do is give up on ourselves. So yes, we need to get up. We need to find something admirable within ourselves. On a personal note, I remember when I first met Sun Master Songdam, I found him to be very admirable. And before I had encountered any of these teachings, strangely, I thought of him more as a friend, as a personal friend. And I even said to him, and at that time I was completely ignorant of Korean etiquette, but I said to him that I see in you, in my broken Korean, I said to him, I see in you a child or a small boy with whom I think I could be friends. And this is something that he's teased me about ever since. But I did find over time that he was a good friend to our community. As he led and ministered our community at Yonghwa-sai, he has been a good friend, a Kalyana Mitrata to us over the years. Now, this is something that's taken for granted within our community. But what I found to be even more interesting was that as a good friend, it wasn't simply that we saw something admirable in him. As a good friend, he persuades us that there is something admirable in us, that he wants our friendship as well. And he says this to us, his disciples, in no uncertain terms. He says to us, if I am to accept you as my disciple, I must ask you, please get enlightened and deliver me. He asks us to be a good friend. When we become a good friend to someone, we ask and demand of them that they be a good friend to us. This is something that I've been privileged to learn under Sun Master Songdam. It's not simply that a master is great before us. He or she points our eyes to the greatness within ourselves. So I ask that all of our viewers and our studio audience members take these teachings of the Buddha on admirable friendship to heart and find the courage and conviction within ourselves to go out and seek friends again if we've fallen out of touch or if we feel alienated. And when we find someone in whom we see something admirable, that we become admirable ourselves and we approach them once again like we did when we were kids in school. And we go up to them and we say to them, I will always be there for you. Will you always be there for me? Thank you very much. And once again, I will close with the traditional Buddhist greeting. May we all attain the Buddha.